Thank you all for being here so much. Thank you all for being with me tonight. All right, so as usual, we'll follow the usual pattern for these seminars. We'll start with a little prayer of gratitude, and then that's followed by me giving a recap of what energy healing is in a few sentences. And then we'll dive into tonight's topic, which is practicing energy healing. And as you all know, we've done a lot of theory, and it's nice to get our feet wet and actually do the work, because that's the exciting part. And we're here in lovely Sedona. My dear friend Amarnath made this like amazing, it's a heat sensitive, it's like a infrared camera. So it shows the energy in the space. That's why the trees look red instead of green. Anyway. Yeah, I know, right? But you guys will get to see it on the reruns. So anyway, you can come peek. You can come peek. Anyway, all right, so let's do the prayer. Thank you to being for everything. Thank you to the eternal tradition of wisdom for holding fast that aspect of consciousness that supports the flow of wisdom. Thank you to everyone here, to our great healing circle. Thank you to the divine in all of us as it flows through all of us. And thank you, of course, with humble gratitude to our ancestors, without whose contribution we wouldn't be here. So God bless the ancestors. And may our work tonight may we bless this session tonight, this webinar, with the ability to work concisely and efficiently and profoundly. And may we address the most important issues that are required at this time. And may we use the potential of our healing circle in the highest and best possible way. Again, thank you to the Holy Tradition. All right. So, and thanks to everybody who's here tonight new, because it's always fun to do the little recap of what is energy healing. So we'll go into that first. So in a sentence, energy healing is the process of focusing attention intelligently in order to produce a specific effect in the field of the manifest field of creation. So attention's kind of unmanifest, right? It's like not physical, but it actually sits in the gap between physical and non-physical. And that's why if somebody's looking at you, you know it. Even if you don't actually have eyes in the back of your head, you can feel their attention because it's in that gap between physical and non-physical. So attention is consciousness. It is awareness. It is perception. And so it has all the qualities of the source of consciousness, which is totality, fullness, unboundedness, completion. So wherever it lands, if there's a symptom in the body, if there's pain somewhere, the pain is a marker that brings awareness into the spot that needs the attention, and the attention goes there, and it brings balance, and it brings wholeness, and it brings the completion to the incompletion that was responsible for the illness in the first place. So it's simple, simply put. We just are focusing our attention. And the thing about focusing attention is, and the thing about what we're offering in these healing sessions is that we're looking at the ocean of consciousness. And the ocean of consciousness is big. So we need a roadmap. We need some markers to know where to focus the attention. Because as we all know, if we focus the attention just on the symptom itself, we may not get to the actual cause of the imbalance. So we have to figure out, how do you get from the symptom to the seat of the imbalance? How do you get from the symptom where it hurts to what caused the hurt? So we've talked about these points of reference, which are different axes that range from infinity to infinity, but they move through the manifest field of creation in various ways. And one of them is the y-axis, and that ranges from dense material down to very, very subtle. And another one is the x-axis that ranges from like horrible, infinitely horrible to infinitely wonderful. And the z-axis that ranges from smaller than the smallest to bigger than the biggest. And that's the one that modern science uses a lot, right? Because when modern science looks at the physiology or it looks at a symptom, it says, well, you know, there's the whole body, but then you've got body systems, and you've got tissues, and you've got organs, and then cells, and so forth, and down, 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 down to the subatomic and quantum level of the physiology. So it goes down to small. So that's one way of looking, right, at the system, large and small. Oh, somebody's at the door. Somebody else wants to hear this. Very nice. Okay. So that's another way of looking. Another way of looking is from completely, fully not conscious to completely, fully, full conscious, like the conscious as God would be conscious, like full awareness, full awakening, full field of perception. So these are just different markers, but the reason that I'm bringing them out is that within the whole range, at each end of these markers, there's always infinity. And it's the same infinity, even if we're looking at larger than the largest and smaller than the smallest. The infinity that's larger than the largest and the infinity that's smaller than the smallest is the same infinity, like a necklace, right? So, look, oh, I've got the different markers. So we have infinity. And then there are different ways of like cutting it up, breaking it up. And we use those as means of, for the awareness, it can travel on those different threads to find, we can look at the symptom from different angles. All right, so enough about the landscape. We'll come back to it for sure. The piece of information that I wanted to bring out today that I haven't brought out in the webinars thus far, and a big shout out to my friend who gave a lovely talk the other day about the gap, is that all healing energies come from a very delicate spot in that ocean of consciousness. And to understand this, we have to take a quick look at the healing algorithm, which is another basic. And the healing algorithm it's a process of moving awareness. It's a way to move awareness when there is a symptom. You start with the symptom, it hurts, okay, and then what happens is we experience that uncomfortable aspect of the symptom and then allow awareness to settle into silence. And from the silence, two different options come out. One is further elaboration of the symptom and what's really behind it and what's really the main issue. Or if you've already got that figured out, the second thing that come out of the silence is the antidote. So the question is, what happens in that silence exactly? That's what we need to look at today, because that's a key point in this process, in this healing algorithm. All right, you can check videos and knowledge base and other things for more elaboration of the healing algorithm. There are 4 phases. According to Vedic science, there are 4 phases of this process. There's the collapse from the relative field of creation into the field, the source of creation, infinite silence. So step 1 is the collapse. Step 2 is the infinite silence. Step 3, that silence, which is like in a resting state, starts to warm up to become something. So there's the silence resting, and there's the silence preparing to become. Silence warmed up. That's the 3rd spot. And the 4th one is the emergence, back out again. You can see we've got our divine dialogue there, right? It also correlates with yin yang symbol and the hero's journey and many other basic principles for understanding. The magic is in the point where the silence starts to warm up. That's where the antidotes come. That's the place from where the antidotes come. That's the place where all the knowledge comes. It's the key to the whole thing. So, I've talked about all these points of reference, right? The different axes, and that the principle is to find balance, like in the x-axis, which one is dealing with most predominantly when dealing with illness. We're dealing with something that's uncomfortable. So we've got, sorry, I've got my microphone right here, but see if it works this way. So we've got the x-axis from like a horrible experience up to a nice experience. And the key is to maintain balance in that state of chaos and order, if you want to call those chaos and order, to maintain balance, because from the balance point, it's easiest to get down to that point of silence. If we're not gripped by the negativity, and we're not overshadowed or overwhelmed by the positivity, but right in the middle, then we come down to the point of silence. So we need to dive into that spot between the silence, which is folded in on itself, the source of creation, folded in on its own nature and fully resting mode, versus that moment when it turns and it starts to emerge forth as a solution to the problem. That's the point of, you could say, the control center. Very delicate. So we're just going to feel that spot. Oh, the silence in the group is so luscious. The silence in that spot is so luscious. This whole thing, if we look at our y-axis, we count these as the two lower, oh, hi. The two lower points in the y-axis of before manifestation occurs. In Sanskrit, we call that para prakriti. Before, para means beyond, and prakriti means nature. So before nature starts to manifest up, you've got the full silence resting on itself, and then it starts to warm up. So nothing has manifested. So what that means is absolute. It's possible to have absolute perfection, absolute balance, supersymmetry. It's referencing the unified field, all the laws of nature, supersymmetry. So in that spot, taking a dive, it is the point of what we would call ideal relationship. Ideal relationship with the mother of creation, the being of all, with its own nature. So out in the relative, all kinds of different relationship situations can come up, but down at that spot, relationships are perfect. The reason this is one way of looking at it, but the reason this is important is because what we experience from one moment to the next is primarily founded upon our own relationship with ourself. And our own relationship with ourself is, to a large degree, it cultivates over the course of a lifetime based on relationships that we have with other people and with our parents and our family and our friends, our tribe, right? But all those relationships have their source in the relationship. And that relationship, oh, beautiful. And here's a beautiful point coming in. Is everybody getting that on the chat? I'm reading out to the group from the point, oh, I lost it. Your message only came up for a second. This is coming from one of our dear, very wise participants from Pure Consciousness. There is no axis of good versus bad, only balance. Yes, exactly. Because once an individual, right, okay, so this is, thank you for the point, and we need to elaborate. We're going to get to a healing here in a second. But I mean, this is such a great point. So in the relative level of creation, we experience our life, our world, our reality with all, times when things are falling apart, times when things are building up, times when life is blissful, times when we're dealing with challenges, right? But from the point of absolute balance deep within the self, all that play and display of the relative is just still part of being. And from a relative point of view, and with our language, we've defined certain aspects of that cycle of the divine dialogue. Basically, one side is the collapse and the other side is the emergence. We tend to define the collapsing side of the divine dialogue as not good. They build the castle and then the wall falls down. Or the body breaks down, or something's breaking down, considered not good. Not good. But from the point of balance, it's seen as a necessary structure required to support totality, because both the descending line, or the collapsing side of being, and the emerging side of being balance each other in wholeness. So when the individual awareness is balanced, then those two sides are seen, like the yin yang symbol, they're seen as necessary components of the whole picture. And then it's not like, oh, that was bad or that was good. It's just, that is, and totality is at every point in that process. Thank you for that exquisite comment. All right. So, moving forward, one of the points that came up when I was thinking about tonight's webinar was that we're sitting at a kind of a crucial junction point in the evolution that's taking place in the whole world and in our whole field right now. And the reason is because we're coming up, nature always likes to go in cycles, right? There's the collapse and the emergence. And so what's happening is, if we look, I just shout out to my dear friend who's here. If we look at what's happening with the celestial bodies in our world right now, what we see is that coming up in a couple of years, a very good time. And that's been sort of predicted from a lot of different strings, right? Like there's an American Indian tradition that's predicting 2020, and there are other traditions. But if you look at what happens in the planets, Saturn will be in its own house, Jupiter will be in its own house, Mars will be very beautifully placed, and there's a great opportunity, and there's a great sort of structuring for a very blessed time coming up ahead of us. But we know what happens in nature, right? Before it goes like this, it goes like this. So, so we know this because we're not dumb. We've done this before. So I'm not trying to scare people, right? This isn't like, oh no, something terrible. No, it's that forewarned is forearmed. And one of the reasons that the collapsing side of the process has been identified as not positive is because so many times it takes people by surprise. So many times, if the awareness is gripped by the relative, the idea that the relative has to break down a bit in order to give rise to a point of transition, then unless always when we go into the transition, we're dealing with the unknown at its maximum value of unknownness. So as the collapse comes in, and we're facing the unknown, there's an element of uncertainty of whether I have all the resources I need to deal with that. So that's where energy healing comes in. Energy healing provides resources. All right. So, oh yes, one more point. The universe is perfect in function. Oh, that's a quote. Does everybody see it says MMY? That's a quote from Maharishi. Beautiful. Beautiful. Okay, so human nervous systems designed to experience life in a sequential manner. The universe is complete in its totality. So we have the unique and extremely important position of providing a perspective on the whole universe for divine being as ourselves, divine being as ourselves, gets a chance to experience the universe, what it doesn't know, the surprises, the learning experiences. Okay, so now I'm just going to do a scan through this whole situation, because what we have coming up is we only know a certain amount. We know that there's a good time coming. We know that there's this big kind of scintillation of energy on Earth right now, with lots and lots of people becoming interested in spiritual topics, wanting to become more conscious, wanting to awaken. And at the same time, there are certain factors that are present that have the potential to create a chaos or havoc, to wreak some sort of havoc. And so we are in a unique position in our healing circle here. And I'm feeling, by the way, the capability and the profoundness of the healing energies tonight, just so tangibly and so palpably. So I feel as if we're ready. This is a dance class, and it's like, okay, teacher, let's put on the music and let's dance. So okay, let's do this. So we're just going to go in, and we're just going to go in and look. So all I'm doing is I'm just looking at the situation from my perspective and getting to be your voice. And I go into silence, and I tell you what I'm doing, because that's how I do it. The first thing I'm feeling is a degree of grief. And that doesn't surprise me, because anytime there's a really major transition, there's always something that's lost in order for something else to emerge and begin. And always that thing that's lost is like, again, to quote Maharishi, oh, my hut. It's always the hut that you're losing. And yet, to trade it off for the castle, right? But the thing is that even that, there were memories in the hut. There were moments that were significant or meaningful or important, even in the hut. So I'm just looking at that element there, because that's a blocking element, and it's in the collective. It's not in us. You guys are ready to move, but it's in the collective. So we, as our collective, our little healing collective, our grand little healing collective, is looking at the field of the human collective and looking at that element of attachment to what was, or there's an illusion under the grief, and the illusion is, oh, well, you know, everything could just stay the same. Nope, it doesn't. It's not going to stay, no matter what we do, it's not going to happen. So yeah, we can just, that illusion needs to erase. That idea that, oh, well, I could just somehow organize things so nothing ever changes, and I'll just sit here on my couch and be happy for the rest of my life. No, it doesn't work that way. So going into the couch, going to the couch for people, all the people with the couch. And there is fear. Fear is under that. So I'm just reading it to you guys. So we're analyzing it now, right? Every time we find a piece, we go into silence, then we find another piece, then we go into, this is the algorithm, right? I just talked about it. So now, so we found there was the grief, and then under that there was the attachment, and now under that there's fear. And I'm looking at the fear. The fear is, of course, dealing with the unknown. Fine. So checking where it is. I'm feeling that deep in the core of people's physiologies. And it almost feels like maybe it's in the spine or something. It feels like deep in the core. And for those of you who are new to these energy healing seminars, the way I'm reading that is I put my awareness, I just ask innocently, where is it? And then I let the awareness fall into silence, and then some area lights up. Our bodies, our amazing, divine, incredible bodies, have this capacity or ability to reflect divinity. They are made bilaterally symmetrical for a reason, because that gives us the two sides, like the two strokes of the divine dialogue. And so we can read off of our own physiology. So I can feel it. I checked it once, I checked it twice, 3 times. It's in the core. Okay, good. I'm asking, is it in the cord of light, or is it actually in the physical nervous system? Now we're looking at the whole of the human collective. So what I'm getting is a rather spectrum. It's a spectrum, but for most people, and the area it looks like that we need to look at is the actual physical nervous system. So I'm asking then what we need to do. The fear is in the wiring in the nervous system. It's in the wiring. And there's an element of ego that's connected with that. The ego is there to protect, to a certain degree. I mean, that's why we have egos, is to be able to make decisions that are in favor of our own perpetuation of life. That's not a bad thing. I mean, in some spiritual circles, people are, feel like the ego is blocking me from my enlightenment or something. But ultimately, all the bits and pieces of self merge with totality. And so it's not so much necessarily a matter of throwing things out as it is a matter of embracing and integrating them into the larger scheme of self. Anyway, in the ego, the fear, as soon as we put the attention in there in the nervous system and the fear starts to move around a little bit, it starts to loosen up. Under that, this ego comes forward, and the ego is connected to and associated with early childhood experiences. That it seems to be a common pattern on Earth, that many children have this moment where they feel as if they want to fit into society, but in order to do that, they have to give up something of their divine connection. And that's pretty much across the board. Like in all cultures, there's a point. Most children are socialized between like ages 2 and 3, around there. By the time you get to 4, they have to be mostly socialized at that point, otherwise there's trouble. So it's around there. It's around that 2 and 3-year-old point. And that's that's kind of like consider the terrible twos. And it's always a challenge for parents to figure out how to manage that part of the parenting process. So what's happening, what I'm feeling is a beautiful infusion from the gap, because remember, mother, that's like the first relationship, right? Is the relationship of divine being to its own nature. And our individual, we are the expressions, we are the antennas, right, of divine being. So it's our relationship with our own nature is right in that gap. And in that gap, that relationship resides in perfection. So from that gap, blueprints or templates can be extracted, which are full of knowledge and understanding for the parents. And we can do this for the generations. I can see that. It wants to open up like that. This is because we have such a big group, we can expand it. So it's going for the generations. 5, 6, 7, 8. Can we go more than 8? It looks like we can go up to 12 generations. Can we go more than 12? It looks like 12 feels full. That feels to me like that's good. 12 is good. So we're going to go back 12 generations, not in every single case. In every single case, it could be slightly different. But we're going back at least about 12 generations for most people. And what we're doing is I'm watching and reporting. But as a group, we're also kind of watching and reporting that through us, through our DNA. Can you feel your DNA? It's pretty fine. That's a bit of a stretch, right? Like, how small can I feel? The eye can see a single photon. That's pretty small. That's smaller than a DNA. But we go in and there's a place I call the archive of the ancestors. And I identify the collective, let's see, here's my microphone. Okay, I identify the collective, this is the y-axis here, everybody, right? So I identify the collective levels of self here at the causal. So we've got the two values of the gap here of infinity, and then the finest relative level of manifested self is where we find all of our collective versions of our being, realms of creation, and the different, we could say races of subtle beings or something like that, but it's all part of the self. It's all found within these physiologies. This is the beauty of the human physiology. It's such a gift. It's such a gift. It's such a gift. Sorry. Okay, I had to tell that to somebody. Okay, so the archive of the ancestors, it's part of our collective self. We're going to feel that just for a second. Part of our collective self, the archive of the ancestors. It has an energy signature that's unique in each person. This love, there's a quality of wisdom and love combined that's part of the nature of that gap. And it's been moving all this time out, all this time I was talking about all this stuff, out into the more relative levels of the physiology, and it's communicating to the ancestors. It starts out like a little seed or a little thread of information, and then it just expands as it moves in each individual. As it starts to unfurl within their being, within their physiology, it becomes enriched. And I'm asking, why is it doing that? And what I'm getting back is because it's fueled by the love that's in that gap, which has a quality of infinity. Everything in the absolute is infinite, right? Infinite, eternal, absolute. So that infinity is behind it. So even something that comes out like a little stream, just like the way little streams can carve big canyons, right? Same thing. You know, you think, oh, it's just a little soft piece of water. What can that do to a big, hard, million-year-old rock or something? But yeah, it can do a lot. So I'm tracing it with my awareness. I'm just tracing the flow of that beautiful, potent, like concentrated quality of consciousness, which comes out of that gap of the perfect relationship and moves into the finest relative level of the physiology, speaking to the molecules of the body, right? Speaking to the DNA and supporting the intelligence of the DNA. The DNA could be one of possibly the most intelligent parts of our bodies, which I'm just thinking that right now. I mean, all the parts of our bodies are pretty smart, but I'm thinking the DNA has a kind of special quality about it, doesn't it? It's like, it's already a kind of compactified wisdom in its own nature, so we're taking it anyway. So that compactified wisdom meets compactified wisdom in the DNA, the archive of the ancestors. And there, as it starts to move in there, there's a kind of scintillating quality that's also, I would say, blissful. And I'm using that word kind of carefully because it probably means different things to different people. But there's a quality of, there's a great force of life force behind it. Like I'm still feeling this energy rising through the physiology, and it's still expanding as it goes. And what's causing it to expand is this quality of a kind of a quality of bliss. That's probably the best word to describe it. But it could also be broken down into a mix of love and wisdom, which is also a very yummy kind of mixture. And I'm asking about this because this word bliss came up. I'm asking about the relationship between this particular flow of healing energy that's coming forward and the dopaminergic system in the brain, because we're working with the nervous system as well, right? And the dopaminergic system is that part, for those of you who are not sure, at the top of the brain stem, there is a little area called the ventral tegmental area, and also the substantia nigra is a little organ in there, and they're responsible for producing neurochemicals and hormones that are particularly dopamine, which creates bliss in the physiology. And I'm feeling as if my awareness is scanning through, our awareness is scanning through that system. It's an important system because it's responsible for the motivation that keeps us moving forward on any, it's on any project, but particularly for the support of our world. We're doing world healings tonight. This is so wonderful, but for ourselves too, because we all get the benefit. So looking into the dopaminergic pathways. Oh, okay. So thank you. Beautiful. Oh my goodness. Thank you to everyone that I'm getting some new information. Although a message just popped up that the fish were buried today. Anyway, so not to distract me too much, hey, to my team, if you talk to the kids on Signal while I'm doing this webinar, it's like super distracting. So just throwing that out there. Now everyone knows the fish were buried today. Okay, we have a pond that used to have fish in it, but doesn't anymore. Anyway, they didn't make it through the winter. It's okay. It's okay, that's the collapse, right? And time for the rebirth. They died the same last 2-week period where 12 people in our community died? And at least 2 at the, and there was a funeral today for a kid at the high school, and there was a big collapse. And this was, I really think it's very, very unusual for so many people to leave the body. Even in our community, it's so unusual. And I feel as if it kind of marked an important spot, showing us that we're moving into this period where we have to work with the collapsing energy some, and that collapsing energy is related to that quality of coming away from the relative in order to find wisdom. We come down to wholeness, pure knowledge. Always it does that. That's the person I was talking to earlier when we were talking about our lovely bodies, right? Because we're also doing a healing for the suicide at the high school. So thank you, everyone, for that. And when I say thank you, I'm telling you, he's watching us. And it's really, we're doing something. You have to understand, when people commit suicide, normally things don't go well. Family continues to, they're continuing their chat, and it's lining up in perfect synchrony with what I'm saying. So, okay. Yeah, so things a lot of times don't go well because the intention that breaks that physiology down is so destructive. It's so non-recognizing of the divinity and the preciousness of the life, of the opportunity to have a human life in the physiology. And this quality of love and this perfect relationship that sits in that gap is forming a seed, a bed, a foundation, a home. It's forming a home for anybody who's had that intention. Even for people who are still in the body, that have moments where they don't appreciate their bodies, where they think they're ugly, where they're frustrated with the way the body is feeling or looking or acting. We're going into that energy right there of frustration, and I don't appreciate you, that energy. And it's forming a bed that washes over the areas of the physiology, including the neural wiring, those habits, the mental habits of feeling like I don't appreciate my body and I wish it was different, and every time I look in the mirror makes me angry, all that. Or every time I feel pain. I mean, I've got people on the webinar really have, I mean, I know you guys, some of you guys, there's some really serious issues. And cancer, and this is definitely the antidote for cancer, because cancer is a kind of death wish oriented energy. So the antidote is I love you. But saying I love you is never quite the answer because it's too superficial. It comes from that gap. So every time we're making a sentence, every time a concept comes up, it falls back into that gap and it reawakens that flow of perfect relationship. Ideal first relationship. Mother's the first relationship. And it's like mother in its her most ideal form. Perfection. Right there. And then that, every time it comes up, it's like it really is reminding me of a river running through a canyon. You know, first time just a few drops, and you think, oh, that's not going to do anything. But the next time it's double that much, and the next time triple that much, and the next time quadruple and quintuple and so forth. And it builds in a consistent manner. And I'm just reading this off of what we are doing, you guys. We are that river. We are the transformation. That's how it is. This is the energy healing, is that it supports the ability to re-identify oneself. Like this relationship that we have with ourself, of who we think we are, is the foundation for our ability to harness our own energy healing potential to its maximum capacity. That ability to harness your full potential to heal yourself through consciousness, looping in on itself over and over. That's all we're doing, is looping consciousness around, is based on each person's individual sense of self. Because if you think, well, I'm useless and I'm helpless and I can't do anything, and she's seeing all this weird stuff and I can't see any of it, and I'm like, then that's what you get. That's what you made. That's what you made. Because all of us are creators. We're creating every second, every single thing. We've created it. There's no part of you that's not creating every single nuance of your universe, like right now. So it's okay if the habits are there, but what we're doing is we're going into where those habits are now. Instead of looking so much in the physiology, some of this with the habits and the thought patterns and the deep root thought patterns of being kind of, you know, well, that's being humble, right? Like, I'm humbling myself because I'm not very good, really. And if somebody says I'm good, I'll always say, oh, shucks, no, I'm not, you know? So, right? It's just like a habit, right? So those come from the ancestors. That's why we're doing these healings for the ancestors, because we're helping our own. It's like we're lifting our own selves up from the inside out. We're helping our ancestors redefine themselves. And as they do that, it's going to be a lot easier for them to navigate through those difficult parenting years when children are learning to socialize. From that point, it just keeps getting easier. The older the kids get, the easier it gets, usually. Knock on wood. I love it. My laugh track is live. Sorry. Anyway, I love you guys. Okay. So I'm just feeling into the system again. Basically, we're lifting ourselves up, but as we lift ourselves up, all this big collective is coming with us. And as we're doing that, that wholeness of creation, that totality, that big source of creation self is also feeling the uplift. It's experiencing it through our collective. So that's where this lovely kind of incremental and kind of delicate continuum of the healing starts to kick in. It has to be a natural process, because, thank you to my friend who's in the chat there, for bringing my awareness to a verse of the Gita, the Bhagavad Gita, which is chapter 6, verse 25, that if the process isn't very natural, then any kind of like forcing it or straining or trying to make it happen actually detracts from the effectiveness. So this is where in this, and I'm just reading this off of what's happening with our group, this is where our process becomes stabilized and integrated, becomes very gentle, but incrementally kind of relentless, kind of a consistent, we're moving forward now like gently in steps. And I'm realizing something about that verse, by the way, which is that the reason that the progress has to be incremental is because the quality of being in that gap, which is responsible for the healing process, is so tender and it's so delicate that if the process isn't incremental, the delicacy could be lost. So what we're really doing is we're using a little bit of patience in order to support the maintenance of that delicacy, of that quality that's perfect in the gap between resting, absolute being, silence, resting, and it's slightly warmed up. It starts to become manifest state. And the energy frequency that sits right in that spot is, according to the ancient scriptures, is Narayana. Oh, here's another point. Thank you, by the way, Michael, and can say your name because you're on the public chat. The gap allows the rest and activity, which is that which moves all evolution. Right, right. So it's like, but it's like this and this. This is rest and activity, right? The divine dialogue is this big flow that's going and going. But the magic is in this point, like before the activity really becomes activity, right? When it's just at its really, really finest point. That's the part that we're preserving by making the progress incrementally and by being a little patient with the process, because it's worth preserving. It's so precious. It's so tender, and it's so great in its effect when it comes out to the relative level of expression. It's, a little bit of patience here at the beginning gives rise to something that's manifesting in a really grand and glorious and incredible form at the surface. So let's just review for a second. We're in our healing group. We've been doing this big healing for the collective of our world. It's founded on this relationship of perfection. It's designed, the intention, the sun culp, or the intention behind it, is to support a condition for our forward progress as a race of humans on this beautiful, really sweet planet, really nice planet we live, as we move through a period which is possibly has the potential to be a little bit rough before it gets really good, right? So it's really good is coming up about 2 years from now. And I was going to put that question out there if anybody knows approximately when in 2020. Anybody? When in 2020 that happens? It's going to happen sometime in 2020. Anyway, so between now and then, we have to get through a period of more dynamic transition than usual. So what that means is that we're actually going to be in this period that's deep down at the deeper end of this cycle of evolution or transformation, right down at that. That's why we're here examining this little gap, this very fine gap. Actually, it's infinite, right? Because it's in the absolute. So it's massive. It's bigger than the biggest and smaller than the smallest at the same time. Okay, so that's our review. So we have that. Now what I want to do is I just want to take a moment of silence again, offering it back into the silence, and see what comes out. So the first thing that I'm feeling coming out is a wave of exceedingly tender sweetness and softness. So that's, I see, I see, I see. So this wave of exceedingly tender sweetness and softness is a kind of a light medicine, which is radiating from our group, the center of our group, out into the collective, for the sake of creating a bed or a platform for progress that will be sustainable. And it will be able to perpetuate and maintain the delicacy and the tenderness of that gap. So we should offer that softness back again to being. So it makes a loop. It's making a loop out, and it's making, this is interesting, okay? Because every time we offer to being, we get more information. So it makes a loop out, and it touches into our healing circle to everyone's Hriddya Mahamarma, which is right in your heart area. It's the big energy center right in the heart. And that's different from the heart chakra, which is kind of a smaller thing. The Hriddya Mahamarma is like it's like the whole chest area. So it's folding up into that Mahamarma, and then it falls back into the silence. And then it's another wave of it is coming. And with this second wave, I'm feeling a kind of expansion of the energy through the tissues of the body into the like all the muscle tissues and skin and bones and fat and organs, but mostly around the chest and torso area. Offering it again. This time it comes back, and there is a frequency of sound with it. And I'm realizing that the waves of exquisite music ride on this particular energy frequency. So for some people on our earth, it's coming forward as an impulse that inspires beauty, and probably in other areas other than just music. But I'm kind of tuned to that. Dropping into the silence again. Coming back out again. Okay. Okay, now an upgrade is occurring for our group, our healing group. And this looks like, I'm actually seeing what looks like flow of light medicine in the head. So there was an upgrade for the Hriddya Mahamarma. Now there's an upgrade for the Shiro. I think it's Shiro Mahamarma, I think. Yeah. We already work with the dopaminergic pathways, but now also the pineal gland. This softness is continuing as I'm speaking. It's continuing to fall back into the silence and come back out to the relative. So it's continuing, it's like a little rocking the cradle, right? But as it does that, this light energy is being produced for the head area. And I'm seeing for everybody in our circle. And this is what I'm starting to understand what's happening, is that the healing that we're doing right now is an upgrade for all of our own capacity to perform energy healing work, because we've come to a point where the collective consciousness of humanity was like, whoa, that was a lot. We just went through a big transformation. We need to do incremental, gentle changing. And so what we're doing is we're upgrading our own capacity so that we can come at it again from like a higher level of capability. Nice. Now, of course, now that I have that idea, I'm anticipating, well, the next one's the Basti Mahamarma, right? But we'll see. We mustn't jump to conclusions. We'll see what happens. Because the head is still waking. There's still some waking up happening in the head. And I'm also seeing, I'm double checking back in the Hriddya Mahamarma, in the heart Mahamarma. All right. All right. Yes, it is going to the gut. That's the next area. It gets the wake up. Oh, there are a lot of, I don't know about you guys, but I know for me, that's an area sometimes where stuff gets stored. We store some of our more like personal like stuff, different stuff in that area. So as the light starts to move into that area of the physiology, there's a lot of like identity issues connected to and associated. You know, we think of our biggest identity issues probably associated with a face, right? Because that's how we recognize people. So it's like the main way that we think of, when I think of me, I usually think of my face first, right? But there's a certain level of identification with the whole, all the parts of the hip and torso and pelvic area, partly because it's our foundation. The whole torso, the whole rest of the body kind of sits there. So it's the first part, it's the foundation, we're going into like a more intimate level as a group. And this is very interesting. It's an interesting dynamic that I'm seeing. I don't think our group has ever done this before, that we've had a healing that works on a part of the physiology that pretty much everybody in the group has some little hesitations or some little boundaries or something there, in that too many Disney movies where people get hit in the butt, they kick them in the butt and then the laugh track comes in, you know, it's too much, too many. So it's like it got deep into our awareness, into our memory banks, you know, that whole thing. I think that's what's clearing in the torso, pelvis, abdominal area, is there are, I would say, okay, I'm searching for a word, you guys. It's like, I can't think of it, but it's like preconceived ideas, kind of like that. Preconceived, that's not quite the word I'm looking for. That's too many words, but you get the idea.
But denial.
Well, denial is very much one of the energies that's moving in there. But I'm thinking of something like when you have an idea about like somebody of another race and you think, oh, well, they're from that race, therefore they are, you know what I'm saying? Like it's like a preconceived idea. It's like an assumption kind of. But there's certain assumptions that we have about that part of the body. But yeah, and one of them, certain
prejudice.
I think prejudice is a good, that's pretty close. I think that might be the word I'm looking for, prejudice. Precognitive agreement based on conditioning. Thank you. That's a good one. We are doing this together. Beautiful. Thank you. So, yeah, prejudice about that whole torso, butt, hips, reproductive organs, elimination, all that stuff. So under that is fear. So clearing the fear, because and this came up right at the beginning as the light started moving into this whole torso area, was that, well, you know, if there's some transformation on this part of the physiology, well, you know, you just don't know what's going to happen. Like all of what we know to be order in culture is just going to fall away, you know, and we're going to be thrown into chaos. Well, maybe. but we have to not be afraid to be thrown into chaos. And anyway, it's not like things are perfect in there anyway right now. So there's a lot of forgiveness moving, and I'm seeing energy that's moving across the hip area like that, the pelvis area like that. It's moving across the meridians, the energy meridians in the hips. So it's moving like this through this area. And again, it's a kind of a rocking. And with it is a stability. Thank you. And the stability comes from that perfect relationship. So we're getting stability. And in the lower back, and it's working, I'm seeing for a lot of people here, we're working with the spine and the muscles and the discs and all the connective tissue around the spine and the back, the middle of the back. Rigidity is not a requirement for enlightenment. Yeah, well put. I'm reading you guys the comments that are coming up. People are making comments. Well, one person's making comments. I love you. Thank you. Thank you for like right in there, man. And every one of them is flame on too. So I really appreciate it. Oh, thank you. Yeah. Oh, beautiful. So a really beautiful question just came in, and that is, will pelvic area healing open financial abundance? Speaking of our foundations, right? Because it's like, you know, in this world, you know, that's how it manifests. That's how letting go of the rigidity and we're still with the ancestors. I'm telling you, the ancestors had a lot of taboos, right? They had a lot of feelings of shame and embarrassment, and you know, we can make a laundry list there. So as that's working for us, as this energy is just, it's moving really innocently. You know, it's just in the space, and it's coming in as a kind of loving wisdom that wakes up self-identification in that area. Like, what am I really? Like, what am I? Like, what is this part of me? So that part's waking up to its own full potential. That every particle of our bodies is divine expression. It is God expressing itself, right? So there's infinite potential in every single part. And so besides the kind of washing, this light, this loving wisdom, it's washing away those discordant feelings, particularly for the ancestors. It's also supporting a greater comprehension, a clear comprehension and flexibility of self as the impetus of the transition. That's what's there in that gap. It's the impetus for the transition is the first tiny, delicate, tender, subtle expression of consciousness. So rather than identifying ourselves with like rigid concepts, you know, like I'm this tall, my body's this tall, but look, I can change how tall I am. Oh, I'm taller. I mean, it's like infinitely flexible. It's infinitely flexible. And all the energy fields of the self, they range out and out and out, and they're like huge. They're huge. I need to send everybody, Tom, will you make a note that I should send everybody the Harry Alto picture for those who don't have it? Thank you, my dear, because it's important. Thank you. So we have questions coming in from here, and we've also got questions up here. So let me get to some questions. Clearing up lower dynamism that is slow to let go of past prejudices. Oh yeah. Preconceived ignorance that we have trouble letting go of. Healing constipation. You know it. You know it. Nothing as lovely as not having constipation, eh? So few things on this earth are as pleasant as not having constipation. So yeah. So that's exactly it. That as this light's coming in, what it's doing is it's basically giving us permission to identify ourselves in this area of the body as a form which is transformational. It is the essence of evolution, and that is, it's not just for the pelvis and the hips. This is essential for the human condition, because the thing about God, and I've said this before, but for the new people here, briefly, God is everything. Right? God is everything. There are no surprises. There is nothing that changes. That's where the couch is. God's sitting on the couch, man. Like, I got it all. Everything that's ever been, everything that ever will be. There's nothing new to God, right? So nothing changes. What changes? Everything's changing. Nothing's changing all at the same time. God's got it all sewn up, right? But we are interesting because we don't know what's coming next. Everything changes for us. So the one thing that God sitting on the couch doesn't have is surprises and the unexpected and learning new things. And so humans are here, and humans fulfill that role. That's what we do. So it's not just for the pelvis, it's for the whole life system, that the identification is with this quality of expansion of consciousness, which is really what learning new stuff is, right? Expansion of consciousness, surprises. Well, we even, when you have a surprise, even your eyes, everything, oh, everything expands, right? You can use that for the thumbnail for the video. No, don't do that. Anyway, it wouldn't fit the brand, right? So anyway, you guys are so sweet. So yeah, this is a matter of this happening in all areas of the physiology, because I'll tell you, we've also got people with some blockages like in circulation and different areas of the nervous system. Even there are places where we've got folks that are suffering a little bit of blocked energy there. So this is beautiful to support the underlying elements to those blockages, that to any degree that there are prejudices, or what's this word, preconceived ignorance, or attachments to the couch, which we cleared before, but a lot of times the healing will loop around like that. We'll clear something, then we'll go clear other stuff, then we'll come back and clear that same thing again, only deeper this time. So that's happening now at a systems level of the physiology. And as you all know, when we're clearing systems, we're talking nagas. We're talking the cords of creation, which run through the body. They're like meridians when they're inside the body, but they extend out to infinity in the different directions, right? They extend out to infinity, and they are ancient, and they oversee the healthy functioning of all the systems of the physiology. So healing for this level of creation, this beautiful, precious, blessed, ancient, wise, so wise forms of consciousness that make up the web of life, right? Because it's made up of these threads or streams, filaments of consciousness. It's clearing. So it's examining. It's more like examining. It's like the threads, the life threads that run through our bodies and that are responsible for overseeing the health of the different systems of the body, are like, they're looking at this thing that we're doing with like rapt interest, that we're clearing out elements that we're identifying them with our awareness, right? And the awareness goes in and it softens it, and it starts to loosen it, and it starts to allow it to dissolve and to release in a very natural way from the physiology. And so it's like they weren't expecting that, which is really interesting, because what we've done is we've offered the essence of what it is to be human, which is to not know what the heck is going to happen next. We're offering it to a level of nature's creation of universal life, which generally does know what's going to happen next. So we're bringing in a surprise element there, and that creates bliss. And it creates bliss at more of a universal level. And these threads or streams of consciousness that run through the body and run through the whole creation are our connections to the mother of the universe. So that means a wave of the very essence of what's exquisite and divine about being human just rose up through our healing collective and was offered back to the mother of the universe, basically. Or we could say it was offered back into that little very fine gap where the perfect relationship resides. And now what I'm feeling is something what I'm experiencing, I should say, oops, sorry. What I'm experiencing is something very interesting. The mother of the universe, or the wholeness, the totality of the creation, is looking at this offering that has emerged from our collective back to source, and is offering it back to us in an extremely orderly form. That is it looks like a crystal to me. And I'm actually getting kind of a bit of a visual on it, but that's because for those of you, the Ajna chakra was activated earlier in our session. So that third eye, this quality of humanity, which is to have a nervous system that experiences life sequentially and therefore doesn't know what's going to happen next, that quality is being like, I'm asking the mother of the universe within myself, because I'm connected, right? We're all connected. Is it being offered to us because this is the way it really is, like the quality of humanity to expand consciousness is naturally exquisitely orderly, and that we just didn't see it this way before, we didn't notice it? Or is it that some restructuring has taken place which is responsible for this condition to be different from what it was at the beginning of our session tonight? I'm waiting for the answer. And I see there's a question here, and there's 3 questions up here too. So bring me your question. Well,
just for an ending statement.
Thank you, my love. Okay, here's the answer. This is the answer I got. You can check it with your answers, all of you who are passing it back into silence, how the answer comes out. But the answer I got was that it was always meant to be, in its ideal form, this capacity of humanity to experience expansion of consciousness in a way which is orderly enough that it's really enjoyed. What's been happening up till now is that it wasn't always enjoyed, right? And all we have to do, we don't have to look very far in the past to see that, right? The transitions that took place in the last century, for example, are absolutely, horrific. We never want to have to live through that kind of thing again. World War II and Cambodia and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Communism, et cetera.
The Great Depression.
The Great, so many. There were so many. There were just so many. Oh, gosh, thank you. She lived through that one. Right. That it was intended to be more like this, but it couldn't, it wasn't recognized. The orderliness in the transition process wasn't recognized because we had not found a way to effectively verbalize it. That's interesting. That wasn't the answer I was expecting either. But notice how the answer came out as a verbalization, and it was itself the answer to the question. In other words, I looked in and I was like, what is it about this? And the words that came, I wasn't expecting those words to come out of me, but it illustrates the power and the divinity of speech.
Can you repeat the answer?
Yes. Thank you. That I was just asked to repeat. And so the story, the realization is that the ability of humanity to embody the quality of expansion of consciousness was always, and Michael's saying the divine creative pulsation. Oh, that's beautiful. Yes, that this quality, this divine creative pulsation, this was always intended to be orderly enough that as it manifested out to the surface in the form of culture and politics and education and social experiences and systems of government and everything, that as it was manifesting forth, that it should do so in such a way as to be supportive of everyone's dignity and comfortable. I mean, not necessarily like laying on the couch comfortable, but exciting and motivating and giving meaning to life at that level. It should be at that level, so that as we go through the experiences as individuals and also as a collective, we come to appreciate our divine connection always to greater and greater degrees as we're going through the transition. That's the way it was intended. And something of that was lost because there was a loss of orderliness. And that orderliness is now regained. And my question had been, is it regained because it was always there, or is it regained because we're seeing it now? That was my question. And the answer that came back is yes, both. That our seeing it is our act of co-creation with the divine as it is being recreated in a more orderly fashion. And it really, it wasn't there like a Kurt Vonnegut novel or something where the people had a crystal that if you dropped it into water, it would make the water turn solid or something like that? It's kind of reminding me of that. It looks like a sort of a crystalline form that as it perpetuates itself as part of this healing process, it brings a comfort of stability to the transition process. It's not going to take away the unknown, and it's not going to stop us from stretching ourselves to becoming as great as we can possibly be. And it doesn't give us permission to not make good, sound moral decisions and act with integrity. But it's illuminating the parts of the transition process in such a way that when something in the relative needs to break down a bit, it's not seen as horrible, and it doesn't trigger pain responses. In the physiology, it actually will trigger bliss responses in the dopaminergic pathways. There's an interface between this orderliness and the structuring of our nervous systems to create more refinement in the nervous systems, and therefore we can weather our process more effectively. Guys, I feel like I was a bad mom to you. There are 3 questions and I didn't even open my question box. Okay, wait a minute. Oh, Desmond, how about ending? Oh, thank you. This is from my sweetheart. He says, how about ending with a group practice of some healing techniques such as self-love technique or healing algorithm or something? That's a nice idea. Thank you. I will think about that. You're not my boss. No, just kidding. Just kidding. No, sometimes you're my boss. Sometimes I'm your boss. Shruti, the universe is remember. Thank you, Michael. Michael's reminding us that isn't it Smriti? Smriti, the universe remembers. The universe is remembering. Loving all, and have a perfect BM before tomorrow's webinar at 11. Thank you. May we all come feeling very clean tomorrow. Thank you, everyone, for being with me. This hour just absolutely flew by, and I should not ever be disrespectful to my beautiful husband. So for those who wish, even though we're after our hour, we're 2 minutes past time, but for those who wish, we'll take a moment. Everybody's saying thank you. We'll take a moment, and I think the self-love technique is it's really simple. It just takes a few seconds, and it's so delightful, and it has cumulative effects. So let's do that, because that's going to help us all kind of ground ourselves back to appreciating what we did tonight. Unbelievable. And believe me, I could not have done this without all of you guys. This is a group, it's a group effect. So we'll take a moment of silence, feeling awareness settling down. When awareness gets to that deepest quiet place, I should stop talking, but I'm not going to, because I'm going to show you what to do. Feel yourself holding your own being in a loving embrace. Feel it as if you are the lover and the beloved. Notice how beautiful your love is. It means so much to be loved by someone who knows you so well. No one loves you more. No one knows you better, and no one can love you better. So holding, and notice how it makes the body feel, the physical body. The body starts to flow hormones like oxytocin and serotonin and endorphins and dopamine and Lovely, so luscious. Forgiveness is flowing, understanding, acceptance. All right. Let's open our eyes. Now notice, now we have our eyes open. Notice how all those neurochemicals are still in the body. Can you feel them? Yeah, it feels so good, doesn't it? You can make yourself feel good, like just like that. It only takes a few seconds. But when I first discovered this exercise, oh, I was falling asleep at night, just bathing in that feeling all night long, just so comfortable and so sweet. And every cell in the body gets it, because it's not something that's so much done on a thinking level. It's at just a very authentic level of self-communication. So enjoy that. Enjoy that as you're falling asleep, or anytime you have a few moments, and know that if you do that on a consistent basis, all the structures of self that are responsible for self-definition, self-understanding, and self-communication, and your relationship with the self will become more and more in line with that perfect relationship. And that's a good thing, because that helps us integrate totality in our beings. So thank you, everyone, for patiently being with me for a few extra minutes. It was a delight to be with all of you. I give you all a big hug. Thank you for being with me tonight. And we will continue. Friday's usually a big setup for Saturday. So we will continue this work tomorrow and see where it takes us. Thank you, everyone, for being with me. Thank you. And thank you, Michael, for all the awesome comments and everything. Oh, and everybody, all kinds of loving blisses coming in here.